What happens when the fame, the fortune, and the bright lights of the NFL aren't enough to protect you from the darkness waiting just outside the stadium? These are men who ran through defensive lines, absorbed brutal hits, and trained their bodies to withstand punishment that would break most people. But nothing, not the conditioning, not the contracts, not the fame, could prepare them for the moments you are about to hear. Bullets, blades, ambushes in the dead of night. Gunmen who didn't care about touchdowns or Pro Bowl selections. These are the stories of NFL players who stared directly into the face of death and somehow walked away. Some barely, some miraculously, and some changed forever. Stay with us, because every single story in this video will leave you speechless. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on this channel. I'll greatly appreciate it if you could show support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel True Crime Zone. Thank you. Now let's talk about those NFL players who miraculously survived deadly attempt. Ricky Pearsall. On the night of September 1st, 2024, San Francisco 49ers rookie wide receiver Ricky Pearsall's life nearly ended before his NFL career truly began. While out in San Francisco, Pearsall was caught in an attempted robbery that quickly turned violent. A gunman opened fire, and Pearsall was struck in the shoulder, collapsing in shock as bystanders scrambled desperately for cover in every direction. Police later confirmed that the suspect was a juvenile who had been targeting Pearsall and others in what investigators described as a calculated robbery spree across the city. Despite the bullet tearing into his body, Pearsall's condition was stabilized at the hospital, where doctors confirmed with relief that no major arteries had been hit. His teammates and fans anxiously waited for updates through the night, knowing all too well that a rookie season, an entire career, can vanish in a single instant. The shooting rattled the entire Bay Area, a region already grappling with high-profile crime stories dominating local headlines. But a moment of extraordinary resilience, Pearsall defied the odds. Within weeks, he was seen back around the team facility, proving that his survival wasn't just luck. It was grit, determination, and a refusal to let violence write his story for him. Next, Josh Reynolds. On August 25th, 2024, Denver Broncos wide receiver Josh Reynolds became the target of a terrifying and near-fatal gun attack in Boulder, Colorado. Reports confirmed he had been shot in both the head and the leg, sending shockwaves through fans nationwide who struggled to process what they were reading. Miraculously, Reynolds survived. Doctors who treated him stated that the bullets had missed catastrophic, life-ending damage by mere millimeters. A margin so thin it is almost impossible to comprehend. Police moved quickly to clarify that Reynolds had not been involved in any wrongdoing whatsoever. Instead, he was a victim of an attack gone horribly, violently wrong. A case of tragic mistaken identity that nearly cost an innocent man his life. Unsealed court documents later revealed that up to 12 conspirators had surveilled, pursued, and opened fire on Reynolds and his friends in the early morning hours. Reynolds was shot in the left arm and the back of the head, and yet he did not suffer any major lasting injuries that would permanently end his ability to function. The suspects had followed Reynolds and his friends after they left a strip club at 2:45 in the morning, firing on the group as they drove toward the highway. The shooting continued relentlessly on the highway itself until Reynolds and the two other victims were forced to abandon their vehicle because it could simply no longer drive. According to investigators, the suspects believed Reynolds and his friends were the same people who had used counterfeit money to defraud them in a cocaine deal, but the trio had absolutely no involvement in that transaction at all. His resilience in surviving 2 bullet wounds, especially one to the back of the head, became the talk of the entire league for weeks. Many wondered openly whether his NFL career was finished. But Reynolds stunned medical professionals with the speed at which he stabilized and began recovering. The Broncos organization rallied firmly around him while the broader NFL community took to social media in collective disbelief at how devastatingly close the league came to losing yet another player to senseless gun violence. Next, Tank Dell. The evening of April 28th, 2024 turned into pure chaos for Houston Texans wide receiver Tank Dell. Attending what was meant to be a joyful community event in Sanford, Florida, Dell suddenly found himself trapped in the middle of a mass shooting with nowhere to run and no warning that violence was coming. More than 10 people were injured in the eruption of gunfire, and Dell was among the victims, struck in the leg by a bullet that tore through the crowd. Thankfully, his injuries were described by medical personnel as minor, but the undeniable, sobering reality remained. He had been hit by gunfire in a crowded public space that easily could have turned catastrophic and deadly for everyone present. Dell was treated at a local hospital and then flown back to Houston for further evaluation by the Texans medical staff, who feared the worst during those tense hours of uncertainty. The relief in the organization was palpable when doctors cleared him to begin a recovery that was expected to take months. What shocked fans even more than the shooting itself was the sheer speed of Dell's comeback. Just 3 weeks later, he was back on the practice field, smiling and running routes as if the trauma had never happened. His ability to mentally and physically push through what could have been a career-ending, life-altering moment turned him almost overnight into a symbol of toughness within the league. To this day, Tank Dell's escape from that mass shooting remains one of the NFL's closest and most sobering brushes with tragedy in recent memory. Next, Brian Robinson Jr. On August 28, 2022, Washington Commanders rookie running back Brian Robinson Jr. became the victim of a brutal and violent attempted robbery on the streets of Washington, D.C. 2 teenage suspects approached him with firearms, making demands for his valuables and leaving him no real choice but to comply or confront the danger in front of him. In a split second that changed everything, shots rang out. Robinson was struck twice, once in the glut and once in the knee, wounds that sent the NFL world into immediate, anxious silence. The attack shocked fans who had harbored enormous hopes for the Alabama standout's debut season in the nation's capital. Doctors rushed him into surgery, and the NFL world held its collective breath through those agonizing hours. A gunshot wound to the knee, for a running back whose entire career depends on explosion and lateral movement, could end everything before a single regular season carry. Yet Robinson pulled through with a toughness that would define the early chapter of his professional life. Within days of the surgery, he was already walking again, ahead of every projection his doctors had offered. Head coach Ron Rivera praised his resilience publicly, calling him tougher than nails in a statement that resonated across the league. And then, just 6 weeks after being shot twice, Robinson made his NFL debut on October 9, 2022, against the Tennessee Titans. The crowd roared as he took the field, a bullet wound survivor refusing with every step to let violence define the arc of his story. That season, he rushed for nearly 800 yards, a number that stood not just as a statistical achievement, but as a testament to a will that gunfire simply could not extinguish. Next, Cory Ballentine. The night of April 28, 2019 should have been the happiest, most celebrated night of Cory Ballentine's life. Drafted in the 6th round by the New York Giants, the Washburn University star was out in Topeka, Kansas, celebrating the fulfillment of a lifelong dream with his teammates and close friends. The future felt wide open, bright, and full of promise. But hours later, in one of the cruelest turns imaginable, that celebration drowned in bloodshed. Gunmen opened fire, striking Ballentine and killing his close friend and teammate, Dwayne Simmons, who had shared that draft night journey with him. Ballentine was shot in the glut, collapsing to the ground as chaos erupted around him and people scattered in every direction. Police later determined the shooting had been a random act of senseless violence, which in many ways made it even harder to process or accept. Simmons' death cast a long, heavy shadow over Ballentine's NFL debut, robbing the moment of any joy it should have carried. But his survival was nothing short of miraculous, and the courage he showed in the days that followed was equally remarkable. Despite the physical pain and the weight of emotional trauma that comes with watching a friend die in front of you, Ballentine reported to the Giants' rookie minicamp within weeks. The organization supported him through every difficult step of his recovery, and he went on to appear in multiple NFL games, carrying with him both the grief of loss and the extraordinary fact of his own survival. Next, Terrelle Pryor. On the night of November 30th, 2019, former NFL wide receiver and quarterback Terrelle Pryor nearly lost his life in Pittsburgh. Police responded to reports of a stabbing at his apartment, where Pryor was discovered with serious, deep wounds to his chest and shoulder. The scene was grim, and investigators later revealed that the attack had stemmed from a violent domestic dispute with his girlfriend, Shalia Brisson. Pryor was rushed into emergency surgery with his condition listed as critical. Fans and former teammates feared the absolute worst. A chest wound that close to vital organs carries a terrifyingly high probability of death. But Pryor defied the odds once again, just as he had done time and again throughout a football career defined by improbable comebacks and reinventions. Pryor later received 90 days of probation in exchange for a guilty plea to a harassment charge in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania court. A misdemeanor simple assault charge against him was dropped entirely. Shalia Brisson, who allegedly stabbed Pryor, received 2 years of probation after pleading guilty to simple assault, despite having originally faced charges of felony, attempted homicide, and aggravated assault. Though Pryor never returned to NFL action after the incident, his survival made national headlines. His attorneys later stated publicly and plainly that he was lucky to be alive. The stabbing left scars, both physical and deeply emotional, but it also marked the beginning of what his supporters hoped would be a new chapter in a life that had always been more turbulent than it needed to be. Next, Stedman Bailey. On November 24th, 2015, St. Louis Rams wide receiver Stedman Bailey's career and very life nearly ended without warning in Miami Gardens, Florida. While sitting in a parked car alongside family members after what should have been an ordinary evening, another vehicle pulled up alongside them, and the occupants opened fire without hesitation. Bailey was struck in the head twice and once in the hip. The shocking, targeted nature of the attack left him bleeding severely as his relatives frantically rushed him to the nearest hospital, every second counting. Doctors placed Bailey in the intensive care unit, where surgeons worked urgently to save his life against difficult odds. Remarkably, he survived the headshots, the bullets having missed fatal brain structures by millimeters in a margin that defies rational explanation. At just 25 years old, a receiver who had once been a rising talent in the National Football League suddenly found himself fighting not for yards after the catch, but for the basic right to keep breathing. Though Bailey's NFL career never fully recovered from the physical and neurological toll of those wounds, his spirit proved more durable. In 2017, he rejoined the Rams organization in a coaching assistant role, inspiring players daily with a living proof of what human resilience can look like when it has no other choice but to endure. Next, Chris Johnson. On March 8th, 2015, former NFL rushing champion Chris Johnson was in Orlando, Florida, when his vehicle was ambushed without warning in a drive-by shooting. Johnson, riding in a Jeep with friends, was struck in the shoulder as bullets ripped through the car with terrifying speed. Tragically, his close friend Dreek Johnson was killed instantly in the passenger seat beside him, a loss that would stay with the former champion long after the physical wound healed. Johnson's wound, though serious, was ultimately not life-threatening, and doctors treated him quickly with results that allowed him to begin preparing to return to football within weeks. Still, the incident shook the NFL community to its core. The league's 2009 Offensive Player of the Year, a man who had once been the fastest player in football, had barely escaped death by an impossibly narrow margin. Police later linked the attack to gang activity, though Johnson himself was never charged or implicated in any wrongdoing. He went on to play 2 more NFL seasons, carrying with him every single day the invisible scars of a violent night in Orlando that could have erased everything he had worked to build. Next, Mike Williams. On March 23rd, 2014, Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver Mike Williams found himself fighting for his life after being stabbed in the thigh inside his own Tampa home, the one place where any person has the right to feel safe. Authorities later arrested his brother, Eric Baylor, in connection with the attack, giving the incident a layer of personal betrayal that made it even more devastating. Williams lost a significant amount of blood before paramedics were able to stabilize him and rush him to St. Joseph's Hospital, where staff worked to address what could have been a fatal wound. While the stab wound had narrowly missed major arteries, another millimeter margin miracle, it raised immediate and serious concerns about his future on the football field. Despite the physical trauma and the emotional weight of what had occurred inside his own home, Williams eventually recovered and returned to the NFL briefly with the Buffalo Bills. But that night in Tampa marked the beginning of the end for a career that had once carried such genuine promise, and the stabbing shadow never fully lifted from the chapters that followed. He later died after sustaining injuries during an accident at a construction site. He was working at the age of 36. Next, Aldon Smith. On the night of June 29, 2012, a large house party near San Jose transformed into a nightmare scenario for San Francisco 49ers star pass rusher Aldon Smith. More than 100 people had gathered at his residence when violence erupted without warning. At least 2 men opened fire, spraying bullets through the crowd as guests dove for cover and scrambled toward exits in blind panic. Smith, attempting to intervene and de-escalate a physical altercation that had broken out nearby, was caught in the crossfire and suffered stab wounds during the struggle. Witnesses recalled the sheer terror of that night as dozens fled the property simultaneously. Police later confirmed that multiple people had been shot and that 2 partygoers were left with serious injuries requiring extended medical care. Smith's own wounds required hospitalization, but thankfully they were not life-threatening in a situation that very easily could have turned fatal several times over. The timing was alarming on every level. This was just weeks before the 2012 NFL season was set to begin, and Smith was coming off a historic 14-sack rookie campaign that had made him one of the most feared pass rushers in the entire league. He was stitched up and back on the field that fall, continuing to terrorize opposing offenses with the same relentlessness that defined his game. But the incident cast a harsh spotlight on the darker realities of NFL stardom, where extraordinary success can attract precisely the kind of attention that no amount of talent can protect you from. Smith's survival allowed him to return that season and post an astonishing 19.5 sacks, numbers that remain a testament to what he was capable of when his life stayed on track. Next, Brandon Marshall. On April 22, 2011, Miami Dolphins wide receiver Brandon Marshall was rushed to Broward General Hospital after being stabbed in the abdomen during a domestic altercation at his home. His wife, Michi Nogama Marshall, was arrested on charges of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, an arrest that sent the story immediately to the top of every sports news cycle in the country. Marshall's injury was serious in every sense of the word. The blade had narrowly missed vital organs in a wound that doctors moved immediately to address through emergency surgery. Police reports revealed that Marshall had arrived at the hospital in critical condition, bleeding heavily and with his life genuinely in the balance. The Dolphins organization and the wider NFL community braced for the kind of devastating news that changes everything. But Marshall proved to be unshakable in the most literal sense possible. Within months of surviving a stabbing that should have killed him, he not only recovered fully, but went on to post back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons, one of the most remarkable athletic rebounds in recent sports memory. Though the charges against his wife were later dropped, the stabbing became a defining turning point in his personal life and the way he approached everything that followed. Next, Kaseem Osgood. On September 27, 2010, Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver Kaseem Osgood experienced a level of terror that most people will never come close to in a suburban Florida home. He was visiting his 19-year-old girlfriend when her armed ex-boyfriend suddenly broke in, masked and wielding a firearm with violent, stated intentions. The intruder pistol-whipped Osgood and threatened to kill him outright, escalating the situation to a point where every second carried potentially fatal consequences. Shots were fired inside the house, and Osgood made a split-second decision that likely saved his life. He leaped from a second-story window, crashing hard onto the lawn below to escape the gunfire above him. His girlfriend also fought back with extraordinary courage in that moment. managing to retrieve a pistol and fire at her ex-boyfriend, forcing him to flee the property before more harm could be done. Police later arrested the assailant, 20-year-old Julian Armand Bartley, who was charged with armed burglary, aggravated battery, and additional felony counts. Osgood, shaken but alive, told reporters afterward that the harrowing escape felt like something ripped directly from the pages of an action film. His survival, which required jumping from a second-floor balcony while gunfire erupted behind him, remains to this day one of the most dramatic and viscerally terrifying near-death experiences ever documented in NFL history. Next, Richard Collier. On September 2nd, 2008, Jacksonville Jaguars offensive tackle Richard Collier's life changed forever in a moment he never saw coming. After a night out with friends in Jacksonville, he sat in a parked Cadillac Escalade, waiting patiently for a teammate to return when a gunman emerged from the darkness and ambushed him with no warning. In a hail of at least 14 bullets, Collier was struck multiple times in the abdomen, the leg, and the spine, left clinging to life in a parked car on an ordinary Jacksonville street. Doctors rushed him into emergency surgery in a desperate race against time, and he ultimately endured 14 separate operations, including the eventual amputation of his left leg below the knee. He was left paralyzed from the waist down, injuries that ended his NFL career instantaneously and permanently. Investigators later identified the shooter as Tyrone Hartsfield, who was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison, a sentence which was later reduced to 27 years through the appellate process. Though Richard Collier's football career ended in that parking lot on a September night, his story became something larger and more enduring than statistics or contracts could ever measure. In 2009, he was wheeled into Jaguars training camp to deliver a motivational speech and was met with a standing ovation from players who understood instinctively what it meant that this man had survived. He later became an ordained minister, channeling the raw energy of his survival into inspiration for others who needed proof that a person can endure the unthinkable and still find purpose in what remains. Next, Steve Foley. On the morning of September 3rd, 2006, San Diego Chargers linebacker Steve Foley nearly lost his life outside his own home in Poway, California. An off-duty police officer had followed him on suspicion of drunk driving, and what unfolded next spiraled rapidly into a violent confrontation that shocked the entire NFL world. The officer fired his weapon, striking Foley 3 times, once in the chest, once in the leg, and once in the hip. The bullets tore through muscle and bone, forcing Foley into multiple surgeries and a recovery that would consume the months ahead. His 10-year NFL career ended that morning, just as the Chargers were preparing for what many believed could be a legitimate Super Bowl run. Teammates described their shock and disbelief upon learning that their Pro Bowl linebacker had been gunned down not by a criminal in a back alley, but by a law enforcement officer outside his own residence. The officer, Aaron Mansker, was ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing, but significant controversy continued to swirl around the incident. Some argued strenuously that excessive force had been used, while others pointed to Foley's blood alcohol level as a contributing factor in how the confrontation escalated. Regardless of where the truth lay, Foley's survival was remarkable, though it came at the permanent cost of the football career he had spent a decade building. Next, Keith Davis. Dallas Cowboys safety Keith Davis is a name that belongs in a category entirely its own, because he survived not once but twice. His first brush with death came in 2003 when he was shot outside a Dallas strip club. Though wounded, he fought through recovery and returned to professional football, seemingly putting the worst behind him. But on July 16, 2006, fate came calling again with ruthless and terrifying repetition. While driving on a Dallas freeway, Davis was ambushed by gunmen who opened fire directly on his vehicle, hitting him in both the head and the thigh in an attack that by any objective standard should have been fatal. Somehow, Davis survived both attacks across 3 years. Police confirmed he was the intended target of the freeway shooting, though no arrests were ever made in that case. He was rushed to Baylor University Medical Center, where surgeons once again worked to save the life of a man who had already cheated death once before. Remarkably, Davis returned to training camp within weeks, a timeline that left medical professionals shaking their heads in disbelief. His resilience earned him genuine praise across the entire league. But his story also served as a stark, sobering reminder that the dangers NFL players face off the field can be every bit as lethal as anything that happens between the white lines. Twice, Keith Davis stared directly into the face of death. Twice, he found a way to walk away. Next, Terrence Kiel. On the night of September 26, 2003, San Diego Chargers safety Terrence Kiel was ambushed during an attempted carjacking in his hometown of Houston, Texas. As he approached his Cadillac Escalade outside a friend's home, armed men materialized from the darkness with weapons already drawn. Shots rang out during the struggle, and Kiel was struck in the ankle, a wound that left him bleeding and in serious pain, but one that medical personnel were able to address with immediate attention. Police confirmed that the suspect had been attempting to steal his vehicle, turning what should have been an unremarkable evening into a violent fight for survival on a Houston street. Despite the trauma of the attack, Kiel returned to the Chargers later that same season, a comeback that amazed teammates who remembered clearly how close the incident had come to ending not just his career, but his life entirely. Tragically, just a few years later, Terrence Kiel would die in a 2008 automobile accident, making the 2003 shooting just one of several devastating chapters in a life cut far too short. Next, Joey Porter. On September 1st, 2003, Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker Joey Porter was shot outside a Denver bar while celebrating Labor Day weekend with friends. An altercation had broken out in the vicinity, and as gunfire erupted without warning, Porter was struck in the left buttock by a stray bullet that found him in the chaos of a scattering crowd. He collapsed immediately as people fled in every direction and was rushed to a hospital where doctors confirmed the grim reality. The bullet had narrowly missed vital organs by a margin that left everyone in the room quietly grateful. Had it traveled just a few inches in a different direction, the linebacker's life could have ended on a Denver sidewalk during holiday weekend. Though Porter missed the beginning of the 2003 season as a result of the shooting, he returned to the Steelers later that year and resumed leading the defense with his trademark ferocity and intensity. The shooting became a genuine turning point in his perspective on life off the field, and he later admitted openly that the experience fundamentally changed how he carried himself when the cameras weren't rolling. Next, Jerome McDougle. On July 28, 2005, Philadelphia Eagles defensive end Jerome McDougle was at his Miami home when armed robbers stormed inside with complete disregard for the life of anyone in their way. The assailants opened fire, striking McDougle in the abdomen as they attempted to steal jewelry and other valuables from the residence. The bullet punctured his stomach, leaving him in critical condition on the floor of his own home and requiring immediate, life-saving emergency surgery. Doctors who treated him later reported plainly that he had been extraordinarily lucky to survive. The shot had come dangerously close to major organs in a way that left almost no margin for error. Though he ultimately recovered from the physical wound, the shooting derailed his NFL career in ways that proved irreversible. He missed the entire 2005 season during his rehabilitation and never recaptured the early promise that had made him a first-round selection. Still, his survival, escaping death in a violent home invasion that he had no part in inviting, made national headlines and reminded the sports world once again that fame offers no immunity from violence. Next, Travis Rudolph. On the night of April 7th, 2021, former New York Giants wide receiver Travis Rudolph's home in Lake Park, Florida became the site of a violent and life-threatening confrontation that would alter every remaining chapter of his life. 4 men arrived at his residence following a dispute involving Rudolph's girlfriend, and the situation escalated rapidly beyond any point of negotiation or de-escalation. The men confronted him directly outside his house, at least one of them armed with a firearm, leaving Rudolph with a choice that no person should ever have to face on their own doorstep. Fearing for his life, Rudolph retrieved his own weapon. Gunfire erupted. When the smoke cleared, one man was dead and another had been wounded. Rudolph himself escaped without physical injury, But the weight of what had just occurred was immediate and enormous. 4 armed men had come to his home with apparent intent to harm him, and the encounter had come within seconds of ending with his death instead. The former Giants receiver was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder, charges that carried the potential for the rest of his life behind bars. He spent 2 years in a legal fight for his freedom until, in June of 2023, a Florida jury acquitted him on all charges after accepting his defense that he had acted in self-defense, standing his ground against men who had come specifically to do him harm. Today, Rudolph's NFL career is a closed chapter, but his survival story, the night 4 men came for him and he refused to become a victim, is one of the most dramatic and legally complex in the history of professional football. Next, Barrett Robbins. On January 15th, 2005, former Oakland Raiders Pro Bowl center Barrett Robbins found himself in a violent altercation with Miami Beach police that brought him within inches of losing his life. Robbins, who had battled serious mental health issues throughout his NFL career, was confronted by officers following reports of a disturbance in the area. According to police accounts, Robbins resisted arrest and became physically aggressive in a way that escalated the confrontation beyond control. Officers opened fire, striking him 3 times, once in the chest and twice in the torso, wounds that sent him to Jackson Memorial Hospital in critical condition with his survival far from certain. Miraculously, Robbins lived, despite losing massive amounts of blood in a shooting that most trauma surgeons would have placed in the unlikely to survive category. The incident was only the latest in a painful and well-documented series of crises for Robbins, who had famously missed the Raiders' Super Bowl 37 appearance in January of 2003 following a highly publicized mental breakdown, one of the most discussed episodes of mental health in NFL history at that time. While he recovered from his gunshot wounds, his football career was long over by that point, replaced by an ongoing cycle of legal and personal struggles that never fully relented. Still, the simple, undeniable fact of his survival that January night in Miami Beach was nothing short of remarkable. 3 bullets to the chest and torso. A body already worn down by years of struggle. And yet, he lived. That is a story worth remembering. Barrett Robbins later died on March 26, 2026 at the age 52. Not every story ends with a celebration, and for some of these players, surviving was the only victory that mattered. What you've just heard isn't exaggerated, and it's not scripted for drama. These are real moments where everything could have gone wrong, and almost did. Situations that had nothing to do with football, nothing to do with fame, just timing, circumstance, and in some cases, pure luck. It's easy to see athletes as untouchable, like the spotlight somehow shields them. But the truth is, it doesn't. Outside the stadium, they face the same risks, the same unpredictability, and sometimes even more. If anything stands out from these stories, it's this: survival isn't about strength alone. Sometimes it's instinct, sometimes it's chance, and sometimes it's just being in the right place at the right time. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to be posting a lot more fascinating and in-depth content on the channel. I'd greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to support the work. Thank you for watching.